Welcome to the Worldy Podcast. This is Aaron, and I'll be hosting this episode. Today, we're debuting a bit of a new format that we're calling the Founders Edition. And what we're going to do is play some clips from our conversation with our guest, and then we're going to provide our thoughts at the end of the episode. Today, our guest is Dylan Jones. Dylan is the CMO of Podium Nutrition and the founder of Buddy's Gum. Podium is a workout supplement brand targeted at CrossFitters, and we're going to talk this entire episode about what Buddy's Gum is. Just for context, I connected with Dylan on LinkedIn a while back, and I've been following his journey and starting Buddy's basically ever since. I wanted to talk to Dylan because he's entering a super crowded space like us, and he's taking on huge established players also like us. Since he has a background in marketing, I was particularly interested in hearing how he planned to do those things effectively. Here's Dylan talking about his background.
I'm Dylan, founder of Buddy's Gum, and currently the chief marketing officer at Podium Nutrition. And I'm super excited to talk about your guys' shoes. That's what I'm pumped about. Worldy, right? Am I saying that right?
Yep, that's exactly right.
Worldy. Cool.
So I guess I'm just curious about your professional background because you're a marketer, right? Is that what you've done your whole career, or did you get into that more recently?
So high school dropout. I played my last year of football freshman year as well, but in high school, and decided I wanted to graduate early is what I pitched to my dad. And what that meant was just moving to Big Bear and snowboarding and not doing anything productive with my life. Worked a bunch of odd retail jobs because I needed money for, hey sub, sorry, it's my daughter, needed money for cigarettes, stuff like that. I'm a different man now. But yeah, I was just kind of a bum, honestly, but I have a running log on my phone. I worked probably 38 jobs, I think. I could not stick with anything, but I wasn't. So in high school, I had like a 4.0, kind of your typical just bored out of my mind. And it was either like just party and B, just go down that whole North County, San Diego route where I'd probably still just be wearing Padres jerseys and doing nothing with my life, or get out of high school and try to do something productive. I did a little bit of both, but I've worked for, big box retailers all the way down to little retail shops. And I always found myself wanting to do merchandising. Actually, I never fell in love with digital. I just kind of was naturally techie. At the same time, I was a musician, right? So I grew up in a really musical family, like very, very musical, a lot of folksy kind of stuff. And then my mom bought me a Beastie Boys tape when I was a little kid. And I was like, oh, this is way sicker than folk. I want to do hip hop. And so I started producing. And I kind of got into soundtracking that way. So kind of had this creative bend throughout my whole childhood that I never really got to apply or use. Like one of the first businesses I owned was on Craigslist. Actually, I posted an ad. I was living in a house at the time where our basement was a recording studio. These old guys, like old dudes that my dad and I moved in with because, we had a string of bad luck and ended up moving into this place. But we were recording music out of this basement that was like fully converted. I mean, they had like, it wasn't just like a Scarlett microphone in the corner and they called it a studio. Like this thing was rigged. Like he's been collecting gear forever. And so my first business was I started recording people that I put ads on Craigslist, like, hey, we'll record a track, $250 a pop. And so I'd get these sketchy people shuffling through my living room down to the basement. And I was like 16 at the time. And my dad would kind of get home from work and be like, what are you doing? What are you doing with your life? And I don't know. I needed cash and I really couldn't stick with anything. So that was the first business, kept working retail. Fast forward, got married at 20. Didn't get her pregnant or anything. We just met each other and knew this is what we wanted to do. We're tired of dating. I love you. You love me. Let's do this thing. We're coming up on 9 years of marriage in a couple months. But once I got married, it kind of like, oh, I'm a provider now. I can't just be this weird guy with no real job or career path. And I was a musician, right? And so I started working audiovisual, realized that wasn't really going to go anywhere. And I really missed retail from working at Zoomies and skate shops and surf shops as a kid. And so I fell in love with merchandising, but retail was kind of going down. And I was like, well, I'm good with computers. And at the time I was working with this company called Rinse Kit, based in North County, San Diego. They were like a Shark Tank brand. And I noticed that the marketing team always got the nicest office and the best paycheck. And the operations team was treated horribly and never really paid. Shout out Rinse Kit. And so I was like, well, I want to do marketing. That's what I want to do. And I could probably do. I started looking what they were doing. I'm like, this is easy. Like this is Facebook at the time. It was easy, right? It was Facebook ads. You use plug and play. You put money in, you get 7x out. That was marketing at the time. And so I fell in love with it. Got another job at Hatch Outdoors, it's like a fly fishing brand, job after job after job, and then finally decided to open up an agency. I was about 25 at the time. And that was like my real first legitimate business where if I didn't work, like my kids didn't eat. And that was it. It was just me providing. And so that will put some grind into you for sure. So once we launched the agency, we scaled it to like 6 full-time employees, and there's no exit there. I didn't know what EBITDA was. I didn't know I barely understood how to properly look at a P&L, let alone grow a company and for what purpose. I was just trying to pay bills. And so once I realized there's no exit, I hate this. I'm kind of just trading time for money at a better rate now. I decided to go back brand side to Mary Ruth Organics. And then from Mary Ruth Organics, went to Podium where I met Paul, because it's just kind of an incestuous industry with CPG. Like once you're in, you kind of know everybody. And I think like in the last 3 years, the coolest thing has just been able to kind of bring back that music and creative bend and apply that to like a natural brain for math back in my operations days and go, okay, that's what marketing really is. It's creative plus operation equals low CAC, high gain. You know what I mean? And so that's pretty much where I'm at now. It's a little long-winded, but that's the full story.
And how is it? I mean, you have a way more interesting backstory. We're about the same age, but your backstory is way more interesting than mine. Mine's a lot more linear and less
You
interesting.
went to law school, my guy. I think that's incredibly interesting.
I
That's
I mean, I guess so. But one of the things I'm curious about is what's it like, basically having a full-time job and then trying to launch this business on the side.
um you ever have a nightmare where like you try to wake up and you can't? It's kind of like that. It's a blast, but it's hard. It's really hard. And I think I'm built correctly for it. I don't think it's for everybody. It seems like you guys are too, where you have once I hear something's hard or next to impossible, something in me is like, I'm going to argue that. Like, I think people maybe are just lazy, or maybe you didn't look at it this way, or I see it kind of as an opportunity. And I think that's the only thing that keeps that going. Cause what I'm doing right now fiscally makes zero sense. I've dumped my entire life savings into sticks of chewing gum that no one else has tried yet, except for my family and one of the guys at Podium. So it's exciting, it's also terrifying. Like it'd be different if it was just my wife and I, and like we could live out of a van and do that whole thing, like easy, sky's the limit. I'd be like Alex Hormozy, you know what I mean? Like him and his wife are just crushing it every day because they don't have kids, they don't have soccer practice, they don't have to volunteer at their church, they don't have all this other stuff going on that families do. So I think that's the trickiest part, is if you have that desire and you just start the business, right? Like we do, awesome. But know that your risk, like what's the reward? What's the actual like output you're hoping from it? And does that outweigh what you're willing to sacrifice? So to answer your question with buddies right now, I think the trickiest part is balancing timelines, because you can move fast alone, but I'm not alone. I'm carrying a family, I'm carrying a mortgage, I'm carrying another brand like Podium right now. And so I'm having to pace that. It's a really intense mental exercise for me to try to pace my desire to grow this, where I just want to fine, I'll just take a bank loan right now and just fire at will. But I'm like, something's not sitting right. I just got to be patient and keep building slowly. So that's the season I'm in right now. It's a solid brand with a solid product. It's just a patient thing. And it's very, very frustrating. I'm not even going to lie. And maybe that's too transparent for a podcast. I think people like to be encouraged, but that is the God's honest truth. It is hard.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Let's talk about buddies though. I know I've seen a few things that you've posted on LinkedIn, but could you just describe kind of like what
Yep.
you're trying to do with buddies?
Yeah. So, buddies, let me ask you guys a question. When is the last time you saw a new brand of gum on the shelf? ANPM, Arco,
I
7-Eleven.
I cannot remember the last time, to be honest.
Doesn't happen. Doesn't happen. There's really like two things I've seen. So I'm not like a passionate gum chewer. I like chewing gum. I like, 50% of Americans chew gum. Like you either like it or you don't typically, and is what the data shows. And it's not that I have an obsession with gum, but I wanted to find a product, right? So I'm good at marketing. I'm good at growing brands. I'm like, it's a skill set I have, and I'm kind of tired of, like most people who start businesses, of watching other brands grow. I'm like, man, I'd really like to own that. Man, I wish I had an exit with that. I wish I had a little more autonomy and control over that. So what I saw was an opportunity. I was traveling a lot for Mary Ruth's, and I was in airport convenience stores a lot, like grabbing whatever gummies or water, and gummies are blown out. Everybody's doing gummies, right? Beverage is really hard. If you don't nail down distribution and you don't have the proper runway to try to tackle about 100 million a year, like you're going to suffer. Beverage is going to be very, very brutal. I'm like, well, how does anyone break into convenience then? Like, this is where shoppers are, right? Like, since COVID, convenience stores are over indexing while big box retail is under indexing. And even sectionally in stores, buyers are seeing convenience aisles through the roof still, while the rest of the store is faltering and struggling. Because why? Like, why do I need to walk the aisles when I can buy online? But convenience is always convenient, right? So if you think intensive shopper, even though the overall foot traffic at retail is down, the foot traffic that is in there is very intentional. And convenience, candy, like these kind of commodity snack things are always intentional, right? Like, you walk down that aisle, you're going to grab something. You don't walk past M&Ms and not grab M&Ms. You're going to buy the M&Ms, right? And so with gum, I would notice, like, man, there's 4 brands. There's like 5. There's Extra, there's Trident, and every now and then you'll see an Orbit or a Wrigley, right? And you're like, well, who owns these? And so as I dug, I'm like, okay, Mars Wrigley owns all of the brands except for Orbit and Trident. Mondelez owns Trident, and the company called Perfetti owns Orbit. Like, this is legit a monopoly. This is a monopoly. Like, if I've ever seen one, right? This is a complete monopoly. I'm like, well, that means that there's exposure. There's a risk there, right? If you don't have competition, you're not innovating. If you're not innovating, then people are getting bored. And I'm like, that's it. Like, gum. That's going to be my angle when I was there in that airport. And so I started researching, like, how can what's my selling angle, right? Is it going to be a premium good and go that whole route? Is it going to be, a discount kind of thing? I'd rather market premium personally, but I don't like robbing people, right? Like, premium shouldn't just be more expensive. Like, it drives me nuts that there's not a Whole Foods in the barrio. Like, and that's on purpose. Like, it drives me crazy. You know what I mean? Like, premium shouldn't be that. And so, like, I started digging into these ingredients and some of the stuff they're using. And look, I don't like bashing other brands, but these are huge corporations. These aren't brands. These are mindless corporations just sucking up money. And so it's a small cap. Once I dug into it, it's like maybe 2.5 to 2.9 billion dollars a year. But the piece of pie you get from that small cap is much more meaningful than trying to go into protein powders or other kind of things that a lot of founders are going into. On top of that, I think it's a better story to say that you have to invent something, because all of these companies have everything under locked, like under patent. So their machinery, most of it's patented. The way that they're making like these gum and processes, top secret. They like legit will not share it. So from the very get-go with Buddies, it's been challenge after challenge of trying to find, like, there is no such thing as a co-manufacturer for gum unless I need to order 20 tons. And then they wouldn't accept my formulas because I tried to go the efficacy route, right? So what makes Buddies different is that I have it's efficacious at a microdose level, right? So you have certain new gums coming out like Neuro and Rev where they're highly caffeinated. Let me ask you guys a question. If you could chew a piece of gum and get the same amount of caffeine as you would in a cup of coffee, would you guys want that? I personally wouldn't. Like, that's diarrhea and anxiety. That's all I'm hearing is, like, I'm going to chew this piece of gum. I'm going to get 90 milligrams of caffeine. And what if I want a piece of gum later? Now I've got 2 cups of coffee in me plus the cup of coffee that I drink, or like, it's too much. And so I was like, well, let's have more people chew a lot more pieces of gum, have it taste better, have it naturally sweetened, have it Whole Foods approved, and sell at the same price point as 5 gum. No co-man in the world would take me on. It's just too much to ask. And so I had to find this lab in Spain. They took, after convincing them, they let me pay them. I'm like trying to give people money and they wouldn't let me. I finally am able to pay them. They make the formulas. I send them all the ingredients. I build out the supply chain, like, just at midnight. And finally now we have the piece of gum. So Buddies, the whole angle with this is I want to sell a $2.99 pack of gum that is naturally flavored and sweetened, is sugar-free, is the same 5 calories as 5 gum, and doesn't have any nasty preservatives. Plus, depending on the flavor, it's going to either give you electrolytes, it's going to give you vitamin C and vitamin D, or it's going to give you some nootropics for focus. That's it. That's the whole angle. So it's gum, but more productive.
That's cool.
But, yeah, that's pretty wild. Were you coming up with that like ingredient? Like, were you like whipping this up on your own?
Completely.
Dude, that's
Yeah.
pretty awesome. That sounds kind of similar to like the you heard of truff, like
Oh
the
yeah, the
sauce.
sauce.
Yeah, it's
I
like
have heard of
two
it.
guys. I want to say they were from like Southern California as well, just like whipping up sauce in their in their kitchen, and then
It's crazy, man. Like I had to learn, like you say electrolytes and people are like, oh yeah, like hydration, but you're like, what is electrolyte? It's salt. And you're like, well, what? It's not just like table salt. Like what salt are we talking about here? And so I've had to dive. I know more about salt now than I ever would have cared to know. Different gum bases, what acidity does to different types of ingredients. Like it's been very difficult. And I think if I wasn't this like obsessive over things, like addictive personality type, like I think people would have quit by now. And even down to the form factor, like the fact that I want to sell it in sticks is very discouraged. I finally found a couple co-mans that would take me seriously after I had the formulas done, and I came back. I'm like, hey, I proved you wrong. It actually is possible. Will you make this? They're like, oh, you should do chiclet because we don't want to do this style packaging. I'm like, so now I got to build a packaging machine? Like, come on, guys. Like you're making me do everything right now. And so they wanted me to do chiclet. I'm like, I'm not doing the chiclet gum yet. I want to have a stick. Like, you don't understand. Like, I'm good at branding. This is what'll sell right now. So it's dude, it's been very, very, very difficult because it's all on my own. But I think that's something like with you guys, what you're building, you could probably, relate to. It seems like that's what you guys are completely bootstrapping this yourself too, right?
That's right. Yeah.
yeah, and we've gone through the whole process of kind of like, or we're within that process of running our head into this wall, hoping to break through at some point.
It's crazy, man. Even just you don't realize how much stuff, even just like the unexpected invoice of like, man, I got to pay tariffs to ship my own soul samples or whatever you guys are shipping to another factory. Like, are you kidding me? That's $1,000 for what? Like some government employee to sign a piece of paper? Ugh, it's the worst, man. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah,
But yeah, we're bootstrapping the whole thing too.
Do,
But yeah, I don't want to give up equity, so we're bootstrapped. That's what we're
do,
doing right now.
do you
And
have any kind of like advisory board or contacts in the industry that you can bounce ideas off of, or are you just doing this all alone?
yes and no. So I have a quality assurance because we had to take this angle of manufacturing our own goods. I don't know what the compliance is for you guys and regulatory stuff is for a physical good, right? But for a consumable, quality assurance is terrifying. Like that you will catch a lawsuit. It's not a win. Like you will go down legal battles eventually, just because they're you guys went to law school, but there are some predatory lawyers out there who build their business off of like, oh, a brand is up and coming. Great. Let's catch them on a Prop 65 label misprint or on whatever. And so it's just a matter of when. So I have a compliance advisor who was with Trivista and also at Mary Ruth's, just to kind of help round out like our offering in case we do take on investors. And then Paul Haverland um, is the founder of Podium, and he this is a seasonal way I have on my shelf, but this brand right here that I'm currently CMO for, he started Ghost Lifestyle, like the energy drink and protein powders and all that. And then he also was on the original team for Nutrabolt for C4. Like he helped get C4 on the shelf. So that dude understands branding. He understands market position and opportunity. And so he's in. I just haven't fully pulled the trigger yet on activating like any kind of like a cap table scenario. I don't have I want my energy right now to go into product development. But yeah, for as far as advisors, I'm bouncing stuff off them. And then, just like it's like who like your network is your net worth, right? It's been really helpful, like getting deeper into the CPG community, even just in group text and stuff, like seeing what other large brands, big brands like $250 million a year brands are doing, and they're making the same dang old mistakes that little baby brands are. Everyone's human. Everybody poops. You know what I mean? And so it's like encouraging to be like, all right, yes, I'm alone, but also so is everybody. Like this feeling, I think, doesn't leave. Like I think even top dogs probably feel it even more because you get to this level where you're known as imagine being the best at what you're doing, right? Like Gary or Alex or any of these guys who are the best. Like who do they talk to? Like who, like, I think the loneliness is probably a permanent feeling.
I think so for sure. I'm curious in terms of if you actually do get into the convenience store or any other retail channel, what is your plan? Because, people will notice that's a new brand, but what's your plan for getting people to actually try it? Is it maybe like a specific exclusive retail partnership and getting end caps, or how are you thinking about that?
So we have a few franchise locations of 7-Eleven taking us on once we have product finished. I'm just waiting on the labels. I have the last bit of machinery that I got to pay for, and then we'll be off to the races. So I have a few purchases lined up, nothing significant at all. I'm talking like hundreds of dollars of POs, like nothing meaningful at all and money wise. But for brand equity wise, it's a big deal to just be able to get in and be like, oh, the simple pitch works because it's a brand new product in a very old category. So that's the first point. Like that's kind of what helps get it off shelf is the packaging and labeling, right? It's a weird name, like Buddies, like people like, what does that mean? And I want people to be like, what does that mean? And I want it to not make sense. And I want people to be mad at that and say this is a dumb brand because they're talking about it. And that's perfect. That's exactly what I want. The other thing is, I think the way that we're structuring our packs, if you can think about like zebra gum, do you remember that when we were younger? Yeah, with the
Yeah.
tattoos. Yeah. So I think having a that style pack and hailing back to that nostalgia when everything right now are these wallet packs or like the clear extra packs. It's very utilitarian. Like gum is very utilitarian right now. So being able to pitch buyers something fresh. The other thing is like inside information. Trident is divesting, or Mondelez is divesting Trident. They're selling it off. So Mars Wrigley will probably soak up that too, which means a few things. One, it's crazy that Mondelez doesn't want their market share. That's insane. Like they're seeing gum and they're like, nah, we don't really care. We're going to focus on Oreo or whatever else they're going to do, right? Um, that's kind of interesting. The other thing is that there's always the last place, right? So the conversation with buyers is probably the easiest part. To answer your question, like getting it off the shelf and into the consumer's hands, I'm really good at digital marketing, which is kind of funny that I picked a physical retail good. Like this will never crush on D2C. This shipping alone and everything, like it's never going to be a meaningful channel. But I think using digital best practices on the retail shelf is something that works really well. So for Podium, for instance, like the way that we use QR codes, right now we have a 50% scan through rate on units sold for a new line that we just dropped with QR codes on our induction seals inside the tubs. And the way we incentivize that with the loyalty program and stuff like that, the way that we handle giveaways through that, I think helps get things off the shelf. And then relentlessly digital targeting. So instead of casting a wide net, like if Target came to me tomorrow and was like, yo, we want to take you on and go store wide, I would probably be like, can we wait till like next summer? Because I don't have enough money to support this. Like I'm going to fail. I will fail you guys. So we're going to pick a couple territories first and then really hyper localize what our top of funnel marketing looks like there. And the marketing that we're doing, kind of what's unique on the digital front to push them into stores, two things. One, we're doing cartoons. So you guys, like with shoes, for instance, you're going to work with athletes, you're going to work with ambassadors and influencers. Great. Awesome. If you can afford it, cool. You had the bandwidth for it, rad. I don't. I can't afford it. What I do have is an abundance of ADHD driven ideas, and cartoons are way cheaper than paying and managing a celebrity relationship, right? And so we're using cartoons. And think Minions meets Red Bull. So like very simple style animation, but with a ton of slapstick humor that everybody laughs at. You know what I mean? And so my kids are actually helping me write some of these episodes, which is funny. They're like little 12 to 15-second shorts, top of funnel marketing kind of stuff. Like my son will be like, hey, daddy, can we have the buddies skateboard down a hill? They hit a rock and then they fall off a cliff and almost die. And I'm like, yeah, perfect. And so we'll like animate that. And it costs me maybe $300 to animate that, but I can run that forever. And again, it's just the whole point of buddies marketing, I think, is can I make people either love it or hate it? That's like, I don't want something in between where people are like, oh yeah, I've heard of that. I want people to be like, this is annoying. I don't want this, or I love this. This is awesome. This is hilarious. This is weird. I need polarization. So look, like these are theories, right? I haven't put it into practice yet with buddies, but for every other brand that I've done, I've had some kind of a winning strategy. It's just a matter of how many shots on goal you're willing to take, right? Like just because one gets blocked, there's always a rebound. There's always something else. There's always another angle. There's always something to eventually score. It's just a matter of, can you outlast your desire to give up? So I think getting off shelf is going to be a lot of top of funnel marketing, really localized focuses, and not taking on big retail until we're completely ready, either funding wise or just kind of slowly expand. And again, the only thing that stops founders from succeeding, I think, is a timetable, because they took on money, they have to expand in 18 months or they die. We don't have that problem. We're self-funded. So I don't have to worry about that. It's just me versus me. So
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the cartoons.
yeah.
And basically, I was thinking it's probably just a way to stand out, get attention. Like you said, get
Mhm.
people to love it or hate it. So that makes sense. What does your target consumer look like? I guess in terms of age, behaviors, all that kind of stuff, if you've done that research.
Gum is broad, so I have the opposite problem. I didn't niche down. I have to pick a niche, right? Like I didn't build a product for a targeted niche. We built this for CrossFitters. This started with CrossFit. We own CrossFit now. Now we can expand. This is kind of upside down from that model, where I have such a broad mainstream product. I have to kind of decide right now who I want to target. I think based on our marketing, I think we're going to hit a really good sweet spot, right in line with kind of like the prime consumer demographic, where it's a lot of 6-year-olds, believe it or not, to like 14-year-olds. I think we'll do very, very well with that. And our ingredient profile is good with that. We're not selling a supplement fat panel. We have a nutrition fat panel. It's very, very important to note. Everything is microdosed, right? So the electrolyte load, everything like that is not ineffable, because then it's just cogs for no reason. But it's so microdosed that like you can still have your 2 Gatorades or whatever, your liquid IV. This is just like, hey, why not have something beneficial? This isn't your dose, your daily dose of anything. So I think 6 to 12, 6 to 14. And then the way that I'm targeting kind of early adults is through another style of animation, where it's more of like an Adult Swim kind of approach, like a Rick and Morty kind of darker humor, not inappropriate. I want to make that clear, because I got kids. They hear me talking about stuff. I want to make sure I'm proud of what I'm doing, and I'd want them to watch it. Nothing frustrates me more than like watching Monday Night Football with my kids and a commercial comes on and it's like an MA rating. I'm like, why are we doing this, ESPN? Like, my kids are in the room and they just saw a dead body. So I want to make sure that it's still age appropriate and wholesome. I think writing can be more clever than it is. You shouldn't have to rely on so darkness or like so much darkness or cursing or anything. But it is a little bit heavier of a show, like a lot more like just a lot more intentional writing. Those episodes are probably 12 to 15 minutes long. And we have our pilot episode done right now. So that demographic, what's interesting about that is it opens me up to target music influencers. So I have 2 influencers right now. One is a drummer with about 60,000 followers on IG, and I don't know, everything's inflated on TikTok, some 100,000, whatever, 200,000. And another one is a guy named Brad Brooks, a really, really good like independent hip hop artist out of LA. We're using their image and likeness in these episodes and then their music, so that it naturally helps them promote. And we're basically going, hey, your demographic is mainstream. It's music. There's nothing more mainstream than just music. If you're a musician, you are a master marketer, because you have to make something so personal, palatable to everybody. Good luck. And if you can do that, you've succeeded. And so I think partnering with musicians is an interesting angle, where we can kind of naturally capture their audience without them going with a single tear in their eye, like, please buy this gun. They sponsored me. They're paying my rent this month. Like, no one wants to see that on their feed. You know what I'm saying? But they do want to see something interesting. So like Martina, this drummer that we have, she's doing sound design for an episode. And so we have like behind the scenes footage of her like making some of the sounds and the sound effects for the episode and her character and like what that is. And it's a lot of work, but that's way more fun and way more interesting content wise. I think it's just another way for our brand, again, to be like, wait, what are they? I thought they're selling gum. Why are they doing cartoons? Who is like, that's fine. That's fine. Be confused. At least you're talking about it. You know what I mean?
And are there certain brands out there that kind of inspire you? There's one that I'm thinking of that you remind me of. I don't want to say it to
You could
bias you,
say
but
it.
are there certain Liquid Death? That's the one that I'm thinking of.
You know what's funny? I have such beef with how popular Liquid Death is. And it's not because I'm contrarian. I promise you it's not. It's because they essentially packaged up Southern California and they're selling it. And these mid-level marketers in like Wisconsin are like, this is revolutionary. I'm like, this is just skate culture. This is suicidal tendencies in the 1980s, only with funding. Like this branding has existed. But credit where credit's due. Their CMO has one of my favorite lines ever. And what he tells his team, so they say on a daily basis, is let's break the internet. That's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to break the internet. So from that point of view, I take that as a compliment for sure. Like that's my goal, right? With Podium, with this, it's like, how do you break the internet? How do you frustrate people? How do you make them happy? How do you make them angry? How do you make them sad? It's music. It's how do you interrupt someone emotionally? That's what we're trying to do. And Liquid Death does a phenomenal job of that at a mainstream level. They never go too deep, even when it's like, old ladies skateboarding. They still they keep it kind of palatable for everybody. It's funny, and you could tell like the angles they're taking, like they're never going too deep and too dark in their own jokes. So I really respect what they do from that angle. I think I'm more frustrated with the people who like fangirl over them because I'm like, come on, man, it's not revolutionary. They just kind of had the balls to step out and do it. Like, it's the joke that you have in your guys group chat. All they did was they put that out on the internet. That's all they did. That's the difference. You can have those ideas too. For brands that I like, I don't know if there's a consumer brand that I relate to as much as I really miss Toonami and old Adult Swim. Like I miss that writing, I miss that style, I miss that animation. I think I just miss the early 2000s. And so I think that nostalgia angle is something that people can relate to. So as far as like brand alignment, I don't know if I have anyone that I'm really aligned with as much as I'm trying to evoke a feeling of nostalgia towards that older style of entertainment.
That makes sense. So with that in mind, I know you mentioned that your demographic might be a bit younger, so maybe like 6 to 14, 6 to 12.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want the kid to see the brand and say, Mom or Dad, I want this? Or do you want the parent to buy it for the kid? I guess, how are you thinking about that?
You guys ever watch Community? Have you ever watched that?
I've seen
It's
clips of it, but I've never watched it.
Okay.
No, I haven't.
Watch it. Highly suggest it. First few episodes, you're like, I'm surprised this made it past like final cut. Like halfway through the first season, you're like, okay. So it actually is Dan Harmon, the writer for Rick and Morty. Like it's his show. And what he does a really good job of is like breaking the fourth wall a little bit. So two things specifically to tackle that problem. One, I want to market to kids as much as possible, which sounds creepy, but like everyone says the mom is the decision maker of the family, right? Like wives hold the purse strings, like they are buying for the household. Not if they have kids. Yes, the mom is making the purchase decision. Dad is out sweating his butt off trying to get through the day and work or whatever. Mom right now is probably doing the same thing and doing the kids in the daycare and whole juggle of that act, right? But the kid coming home and saying, I want this, like that is ultimately who's steering the purchases in that house. Like say whatever you want. That kid is steering the purchases. So I think like to market to kids is entertainment first. Don't ask for anything. There's no call to action with a kid, right? Like here's where the Dan Harmon thing comes in. I'm so reckless with this, I think right now in a good way that I'm like fully okay with even bad PR. Intentionally breaking that fourth wall and saying like, hey kids, make sure you go and ask your parents for Buddy's gum. You wouldn't want anything bad to happen to your family. And then excluding that from kids targeting and only targeting adults or targeting channels like Miss Rachel just to freak people out. That is 100% my plan. Like just to freak people out. So you can, with digital marketing, you can exclude certain audiences and target other ones. And I want to kind of be so on the nose, break the fourth wall that like parents are like, initially alarmed, and then kids have this other view of us to hopefully just create a conspiracy theory. I think that's the angle. I think that's the angle of marketing is like, yeah, pitch to kids, but be so in parents' faces that they're like, what is this? Who is this freak? What is Buddy's gum? That's the plan.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of, do you know birds aren't real? Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me
Yes.
of that because I mean, I've been seeing that for years, and every time I've seen it, I'm like, yeah, that's funny, but it's obvious that it's not real. And then some of my other friends are like really concerned that it is real, that this is a conspiracy theory, things like that.
Parody is the best. Parody is the best, especially if you freak people out with like if they can't tell if you're real or not. Like that is the best parody, where it's like, you ever seen someone so sarcastic that they almost like alienate the joke? It's like they've gone off the deep end with the sarcasm, and like people don't know anymore if they're just serious or not. If you can figure out how to balance that with a brand, you are going to do something amazing. I think like that reckless abandonment, because people are tired of being marketed to, man. Like how many times are you going to see a commercial like, let's like for Worldy, like who's your, let's see your biggest competitor, like let's say you're going head to head with Nike. After a while, you're out of inspiration. Like people like, yeah, man, like show the athlete lifting the weight and running the track in high school, and now they're back here in the main stage and they're coming off an injury. Like, cool. We've seen Rocky. We get it. Like, what is different? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think that new brands have an opportunity where if it's in your brand ethos, it depends. But if it's in your brand ethos and you can get away with it, be outrageous. Like, be so outrageous that people can't ignore you, because you're not going to be able to compete with other brands' budgets. You're not going to be able to compete with their level of athlete or their influencer or the quality of their creative. So go the opposite way. Like, so that's why I chose like such poor drawings for buddies. Like I doodled these on my shower when I was like 15 and 16 and would make little fake comics with them, like as I'm showering or whatever. And I'm like, well, why don't I just use that? And my wife's like, that's kind of like ghetto looking. Like, it's just bad. It's cheesy. Like, I'm like, it's easy and it's cheap. And what if that was our style? Like, what if we just made content as fast as possible, as poorly as possible, and that was our shtick? And now we're saving money. Like, all right, so that's the road we're going down.
That makes sense. So basically what you said is that if you're outrageous, that's one way to stand out in a kind of like crowded space. Do you have any other recommendations that you give to someone who's trying to build in a super crowded space with really big players that dominate a given market?
If I was building something else that wasn't buddies, I would still try to be outrageous, but like you got it like back to reality. Like this brand is that, right? Like right now I'm competing against massive brands with tons of money that are very well funded. You got to know, I think you have to set appropriate KPIs. So, and back to reality, like as far as P&L goes, like it's great that we want to talk about disruption and entertainment and stuff, but like, do you like the best brands in the world, the best marketing in the world is still tied to a real number on paper? How many new customers are you trying to get? What is your actual break even on that first PO? And that will actually then give you a proper budget to then look at how you can actually disrupt and go head to head. If right now you wanted to go head to head with Adidas, no, you're just not. Like, you're going to get stepped on and they'll laugh and walk away. It won't even like it's just nothing, right? It'd be like a toddler fighting, John Jones. Like, they would be unfair. It'd be insane. So you have to kind of level up. So I won't say brand names, but with Podium, launching in a niche, picking a niche was very, very important. So we chose CrossFit. There was no one directly serving them. We told that story really well. And we partnered with the 5-time fittest man on earth, Matt Frazier. Like, that gave us some efficacy. That gave us some like, oh, it's clean. It gave us that kind of story right out of the gate, right? Then we partnered with some content guys out of the scene called the Buttery Bros, and that was our 1-2 punch. That's awesome, but that's not a plan still, right? And so we had to pick, who are our brands that we're leveling. If you can picture a ladder, right? If I go after Jocko right now, I'll lose. But if I go after, and I won't say any of these brand names because I'm directly going after them, but if I go after someone smaller who's just a little bit bigger and is going to stretch my team just a little bit, well, now I've got some actual level playing field, right? If I can steal their market share just a little bit and just be a sand in the eye, that's going to be the win. So don't go after like the massive home run stories. I think little steps over time eventually create a home run story, and people are like, you're an overnight success. I'm like, not really, man. And we've just been in the corner in the dark, like working on this for years, and we finally got some light shown on us, but it takes time. So to disrupt a category properly, I think you have to eventually niche down. You have to pick someone to tackle first, and do not swing for the fences necessarily. You should budget for first base. What is getting on base run? Like, what does that cost? How do we get there? Because if you can't prove that you can get to first base, you can talk about home runs all day long, but if you can't prove that you can even get on base, you have unrealistic expectations and your budget's going to go right out the window. You're going to make weird, sketchy partnerships and try to shoot the moon. It's just going to fail.
And do you think for founders, sorry, Brandon, go ahead.
No. I was just following up, but go ahead with your questions.
I was just going to say, do you think for founders, it's easy enough to learn marketing, or is that a skill that you should really be looking to hire for instead?
I think founders have natural archetypes. I think the best founders in the world probably on paper have like an OCD, ADD bend in them. If you look at the most successful founders in the world, they're freaks. They're weird. Like they're weird people. They either don't sleep or they have like a 12-hour schedule, and then but everything they do is wildly on purpose. Like even the ones who look reckless, they're intentionally reckless. They went on that bender on purpose. Like they're sociopaths almost. And I hate to say that because we are founding things, but think about the audacity that you have to say, oh, I'm going to launch a shoe brand. Are you? Yeah. No. Yeah. What's your goal? Like, have you said it out loud? I don't know what you guys have said, but like, have you guys said out loud, like, oh, we're going to beat Adidas in this space, or, oh, we're going to beat Nike. Like once you say that out loud, you realize I'm a freak. I'm a really bizarre person with a huge ego, or I'm onto something, or all of the above, right? Like it takes a special kind of person to be that audacious to go, oh no, I'm special. Like I'm actually going to be able to do this. Like, so I think taking that then to answer your question, or should a founder be a natural marketer? I think a founder knows their strength. A good founder knows who to hire. So like, let's say you're operationally minded, but you're like, dude, I don't know good creative from bad creative. My socks don't even match half the time. Like, great, then hire a marketer. If you're an amazing marketer, but you struggle with organization and you know your bookkeeping is going to be a wreck, your best hire might be a project manager who knows their way around QuickBooks. Honestly, I think it's better than founders like trying to capitalize on fixing their weaknesses. They should double down on their strengths and hire for the thing they suck at the most. So if you are the type of founder who is a great marketer, I think you're a step ahead as far as like product recognition, which is ultimately the most important thing. But you can be a phenomenal founder who's like a mega nerd operational guru who's just good at hiring people. But you can't have a founder who I think thinks they're good at marketing. That is the one thing I'll say is like, that's a scary scenario. And typically those businesses fail, right? Like not every founder was supposed to be a founder. I love the free market. It proves us wrong or it proves us right. And so I think where you get into dangerous waters are, as you guys are growing Worldy, for instance, let's say you take on a marketer. I wouldn't recommend hiring a CMO out of the gate. I think we talked about this before, Aaron. I think you DM'd me a while ago, like, hey, should we hire a CMO? And I was like, probably not. You should probably hire someone who you think is the right potential candidate for that, but don't give them that title out of the gate. You need execution right now. You don't need distant leadership. You need someone who's good with a machete in the trenches and can like get stuff done. But I think as a founder, the biggest thing that I've seen kill brands, or at least kill growth in successful brands, are founders who think they know better than the people that they hired. There's a delicate
might have lost them.
You there?
We're here.
We lost you for a second.
Yeah, we lost you for a second.
Okay. But founders are incentivized, employees are incentivized to keep their job. So why would that person want to do something poorly? You know what I mean? Let them run with the ball a little bit. Give them something they can make mistakes with. So to answer your question, it doesn't matter if you're a marketer. I think it matters that you know what the heck you're good at. You double down on that and build a plan to put a number on paper of what you can afford to hire for your weakest point, or run that risk up and be like, hey, I want to double down on growth. I'm already good at growth, but I need more growth. Money's more important. Like, as long as you have the intentional plan and you have a little bit of that sociopath in you, I think you'll do great.
And Brandon, I think you had a question.
No, it was not a question at all. I was just going to make a comment after you were talking about your strategy in terms of like how you grow. And I was like, the anti first day of prison. Like, instead of taking on the biggest guy, you just find a guy about your size and choke him out. So, 100%.
That is exactly it. I love it. Yeah, you take a sport and you find the little guy in the corner, and you go, I'm coming. I'm crazy. 100%. I love that. Yeah, that's 100%. I think what you need to do. Have the mind still of like, I'm gonna run this place, but like I'm not on day one. Pick
Yeah.
who you're gonna beat day one. I love that. I'm gonna use
Uh,
that forever. That's so good. Guys, I feel horrible because like I didn't know how to prepare for that. I didn't know what you so I said a lot. I'm so sorry because I know it's gonna be a pain. If you don't want to publish this, don't worry about it.
No,
Like I
this is
totally
no,
get it.
yeah, this is
this is the
perfect.
whole point. I think this is going to be a good episode.
Okay. But I feel bad because like I typically on podcasts I like to try to ask the host more because they never really get to talk about their stuff. Like, and so I kept trying to like ask about. I'm still curious. Like, if you have like these last 5 minutes, I have questions for Worldy if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, we could do that.
You're self-funded.
Hmm.
What are you guys currently doing as your day jobs?
So we're both
How are you paying your mortgage? That's the question.
we both have a bit of time off before we start we took corporate jobs. So Brandon's going to be a lawyer and I'm going to be a
Okay.
consultant. Brandon starts in January. I start in April. So we have a little bit of time off and a little bit of savings. And then essentially like hoping to launch before we start and then just running it on the side for a little bit of time until we get some traction and then hopefully going full time.
Does that worry you?
Yeah, it worries me. I don't know. I don't want to speak for Brandon, but it definitely worries me.
I don't know. Maybe I'm too ignorant to be concerned, but right now I'm kind of like riding the high of kind of getting out of the education system, getting out of law school,
Yeah.
getting out of business school, and getting an opportunity to really focus on something that we're really passionate about. So right now I am kind of riding high. We do have some like high hopes, but in terms of like concern, I think I'm as concerned as most humans are, but like I don't know if it's manifested itself into like worry or anxiety about like our success or whatever. So
I was more so talking about like, I should have clarified, like me working for Podium is a very fine line of like, I'm proud of what I build here, but I'm a very all in kind of guy. So daily, I have to make sure that I'm setting aside the right amount of time for buddies to keep moving at the pace that I need it to like protect my family and my income still, but like also eventually I'm going to hit a fulcrum where I'm going to need to commit one way or the other. And like just talking with my wife, that's our nightly kind of conversation when she's letting me just kind of like, like, let out the little girl cry that I give. Like, I don't know, is this gonna work? I'm like, I know. She's like, Dylan, it's gonna work. It's just you gotta be patient. Like this is there's no one's forcing you to launch this tomorrow. Like just keep making these steps. So I'm grateful for my wife, but like I was asking more so like, do you feel a sense of urgency that like is kind of boiled in you where you're like, man, I'm grateful for the job that we got, but like Worldy needs to keep going, I guess. Like, do you ever feel that kind of struggle?
I think kind of to your last point, I feel like it's almost a blessing in disguise because it makes us slow down and really it's same thing with bootstrapping and be like, okay, we don't have $1 million or $2 million to spend. We're spending our own savings. So like, let's really focus where we need to focus. Let's do things for free where we can. Let's make sure we're validating things before we actually spend the money. Let's get as much feedback as we can before we launch things. So I think there's some benefits behind it.
Yeah.
And also just it'll give us more money to put into the business and potentially keep
For sure.
our equity for longer. And potentially like we could hire someone to do some stuff day to day. And that's not necessarily something we would have the money to do if we were working on it full time. So it does worry me, but I'm also looking at some of the upsides, the benefits of it as well.
Are you guys, technical question about the shoe? I don't know where you're at on development, but it looks like a form fit, almost like flex, almost like a wrestling shoe, a little bit from what I'm looking at right now. Like as far as like moving with your foot, are you guys doing? Oh, look at that.
Yeah,
Okay,
this is the shoe.
sick. Are you guys doing are you doing half sizes? Have you made a decision on doing, half sizes yet?
We haven't made the decision on sizes yet, but I mean, we would eventually. I don't know if we
Yeah.
would with the crowdfunding campaign, but we would probably try to collect sizes before we made the order and then just basically just order based on what people are ordering through that crowdfunding campaign.
Yeah. I mean, nines, 10s, and 11s are gonna for men. Those are your primary ones to load up on. That's like one of my buddies just launched a wrestling shoe, actually. and he's self-funding it as well. He's just like a Facebook marketer at an agency here in Dallas and hates his life. And he's like, man, I just need to grow my own thing. He's still living at home with his parents. So I'm like, yeah, go do it, dude. Like, that's the perfect time. But he didn't do half sizes. And it's still going well for him. So I don't know if you guys were considering that, but he's had no issues with orders. People obviously are like, hey, I'd love a 10.5 when you get it. But he's selling brand and kind of like quality over convenience. And crazy. People are just sizing up or sizing down. He hasn't had to worry about it. So I was just curious if you guys have put any thought into that yet, or I didn't know where you're at production.
Yeah, we haven't made a decision one way or the other yet.
And is it a performance shoe or is it a lifestyle performance shoe?
It's a performance shoe for kids. So the idea is that kids, when they're first getting into sports around 5 to 10, they're trying all these different sports. So soccer, football, lacrosse, basketball, you're playing on the playground. So there's all these different surfaces and there's all these different kind of like sports specific shoes, but there's not necessarily one shoe that is built for athletics, but across all these different surfaces. So that's the first kind of product that we want to launch. And then
love it.
Long-term vision is just being basically like Nike for kids who are, or like young athletes. So kids first getting into sports.
I love it. That is a brilliant idea because it's a premium product, but it's still budget friendly. It's price conscious because you're like, oh, it's one shoe to rule them all. I like that a lot.
Yeah. I think we came up with that exact same phrasing before. Yeah.
No, but yeah, exactly. Trying to make the best like version of an everyday shoe. Like I do it with my daughters. I put them in the same shoe for like everything. Like they go to, well, the 5-year-old now, she has cleats like for the first time, but like I have a 3-year-old as well, and she's like every sport is in the same shoe. And if we can build a better version of that, a shoe that they can wear anywhere, but also at every sport, or multiple sports. So like that's kind of like the short-term goal is to kind of build that type of product.
I like that. I like that a lot. That is really, really cool. Really, really cool. Sweet. I mean, hey, thanks for reaching out, man. Sorry if I went down tangents or whatever.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
No, that's super cool.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah.
I can the eccentricness can come out sometimes when you're talking about your own thing. And so forgive me if it was wordy, but I really appreciate you guys' time.
I think eccentric is good, especially for podcasts. It's entertaining.
Cool. I love the prison comment, man. I'm gonna steal that. Like, I'm gonna write that down. That is so good. That is good. If you need a soundbite for a preview, use that.
This is perfect for kid shoes. Like,
yeah. Just cut between spork in the eye with a little guy in prison rule, and little kid shoes, and then talking about targeting children and having them force their parents to buy things
already.
That's it, dude. That's it. Cool. Well, great to meet you guys, man. I'm really stoked for you. I'm excited to see Worldy launch.
Awesome, I'm excited for you too, man. Hoping to see you in 7-Eleven. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Go to buddiesgum.com. You can sign up for I'm not doing any newsletters or anything yet, just collecting data. So you go to it though and sign up. Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah.
Well, man.
Do it. All right.
It was fun.
Thanks,
man.
boys.
Appreciate it.
All right, cool. I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you so much. Brandon, are you on LinkedIn?
I am on LinkedIn.
All right.
And that is flavorful as Aaron, but I still move around.
That's all right. Awesome. Cool. All right. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
Yep. You too.
All right. Later.
Bye.
So now we're back in the studio. We're going to just provide some quick thoughts on that conversation. Thought it was pretty interesting. And the first thing I wanted to get your perspective on, Brandon, was just kind of what he said about starting a company while having a full-time job. I know we both haven't started our full-time jobs yet, but that's something that's coming up. So I guess what did you think about that? Because I think he basically described it as either a dream or a nightmare that you just can't wake up from.
Yeah, I remember him also asking, were we worried about that? Like, were we worried about that when it kicks off for us this coming year, our jobs, and then still being, full-time Worldy as well. And at the time I'm like, no, I'm not really, not really concerned. But it's funny how like life can kind of like change your perspective, and it can happen pretty quickly, because that conversation that we had with him wasn't that long ago. But like Kate went out of town this week, and so I was with the girls, and recognizing like that's pretty much like a full-time job. Like, and I didn't, I don't think of it like that as a job or whatever, but like it certainly became that. And so trying to do like the worldly things this week, and then also making sure that the girls are at school, or their various activities that happen outside of school. And I'm like, wow, it is definitely daunting. Like, it's definitely something that you really have to be organized, and you really have to understand that it's going to be taxing, and it's going to cause me to always kind of like have to matriculate back to my why. Like, why am I doing this? Why now? Why this? Why us? In order to make sure that I have a firm outlook when it comes to being able to wear dual hats. But I feel like it's something that I've kind of done for a while, so it's somewhat natural. So that's one of the reasons why I said I wasn't worried initially, but I definitely have an appreciation for it, having spent this past week with the girls, and still trying to work with Worldy. It's going to be something that I'm going to have to be very organized, very I can't think of the word, but really like focused on. So I don't know. It's definitely something that I'm thinking about. What about you?
Same thing. So similar to you, I'm used to just doing a bunch of stuff at once. So, like getting our JD and MBA at the same time, working on our own business. It's definitely not easy at all. So this period feels a lot easier because we have so much off of our plates. I'm not exactly concerned about the hours that I'll have to put in once I have a full-time job. It's more like, okay, during working hours, so maybe like 8:30 to 7 p.m. or 6 p.m., whatever it is. Some days 5 p.m. It's going to be pretty hard to step away and, make sure we're monitoring email, if orders are coming in, things like that, making sure that we're fulfilling those on time, things like that. And then also for my job, I might have to travel a decent amount, so I wouldn't even be home. So there's just some complications around that, like understanding basically how are we gonna, if there are customers reaching out, if we have to fulfill orders, like I said, how do we do that? Do we do that after work, before work, and after work? Do we have someone who is kind of like handling some of that stuff for us during working hours? And then we have a lot of meetings, right? So do we start to have those meetings, and we're both going to be more on the West Coast, so do we have all of those meetings kind of like super early in the morning before we start our jobs for the day? Do we have them late at night after jobs are done? Do we try to have them over the weekend? So there's just some things that we got to think through. And like you said, I think we just have to be very intentional about how we go about doing that, and just being really efficient with our time. So I'm concerned about it, but based on some of the people I've talked to, I know it's doable. It might be hard and there might be some growing pains, but I think it's definitely doable.
Yeah, agreed.
And then one of the other things that you kind of noted is just this idea of taking it slow. So I know Dylan was talking a lot about that, and how he's not taking outside funding. So that's part of the reason why he's taking it slow. But what have your thoughts been on, because this has been almost a 2-year journey for us at this point. Kind of how have you looked back on that and taking it slow? Like, do you think it's been a blessing for us? Do you wish we could have gone faster? What do you think about that?
You know what? I think like initially we talked about like wanting to, and I read an article on it, and I shared it with you a while back. I don't even know if you remember, but it kind of talked about like this company. I don't even remember what they did, but one of the ways in which they showed that investors should be interested in that particular brand is that they were doing things so quickly. Like, things were like there's a lot of interest around this brand, and like they got a lot of traction and momentum early on. And so it's like, oh yeah, maybe we should model ourselves after that, like being quick to do something, really like showing a lot of traction. Maybe that's appealing, because at the time I think we were still really considering investors as being like a really early part of like the model. But then we also talked about like getting it right. And I think that really ended up being the thing that really resonated with us, is that we wanted to make sure that we were really intentional about everything that we did, and that we were making a very good first impression. Kind of like an old coach told me, like, you only get one shot at making a first impression. So wanted to make sure that we were really kind of getting it right out of the gate, and we didn't want anything that was consumer facing that was less than what we believe was our standard. So I think taking it slow has really kind of worked for us, because we've been able to catch a couple of things before they became like bigger issues, and then also just educate ourselves in a space that we weren't too familiar with going in. So we surrounded ourselves by a lot of people who had a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, and that's been very useful. And I think that's been very beneficial for us as we're, a growing shoe brand. So what about you?
No, I mean, all that resonated with me. And think in terms of the actual product itself, so it's pretty hard to get a shoe made. Like we've seen that for sure. It's hard to get a designer. It's hard to get the designer to design something that's novel. It's hard to get people to actually buy a new product in the footwear space. And I think if it were easier, we probably would have launched with something that was a lot more rudimentary, probably not as differentiated. So I think the fact that it's so hard made us focus on really surrounding ourselves with experts and people who have a lot of experience in the field, who understand the vision, understand how to turn that into a reality. And I think that kind of has allowed us to kind of like build towards creating a product that's really differentiated. And hopefully when we launch, we can knock it out of the park. And I don't think if it were super easy to make a shoe, I think we would have made one and put it into the market by now already, just because 2 years feels like an eternity, I think, when you're trying to launch something. So I think it's been a blessing in disguise for us. And also, like you were saying, it allows us to, or it has allowed us to educate ourselves more. And if we had launched basically like a year ago or 18 months ago, there are a lot of things that we didn't necessarily know back then that we know now. And it might have been a bit more, we might have had to learn those lessons with, or I guess our wallets might have had to learn those lessons for us. Whereas now, we're able to save a little bit of money and learn those lessons without making the mistakes first. So I think it's been a blessing in disguise. It's frustrating at times, but I think for us as first-time founders in an industry where we have no background, it's been good for us.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of wallets, I know a lot of people have kind of like asked us like, oh, do you guys plan on getting a deck together for investors, or what's your plan in terms of like growth? And we always hit them with like, okay, yeah, we plan on like doing the bootstrapping for as long as possible. And I think I have an idea as to like why I really think bootstrapping really means or makes sense for me. But like, what are your ideas around like bootstrapping, and why we have chosen to go this way?
Yeah. So for me, the kind of not obvious, but the first thing that I always think is just I don't want to give away a ton of equity in our company super early if we don't really need the growth equity. So right now, like we could use funding, that would be helpful, but what we're in product development right now, and getting more money wouldn't necessarily speed up that process. And we want to validate the product and generate some traction. And same kind of thing, it doesn't really, if you spend more money earlier on, that doesn't necessarily create more demand in the market. I think the demand is there or it's not. The money is more so kind of like generating awareness for the brand. And for me, I'd rather just kind of like build that traction and buzz up organically and make sure that, people actually like the product, they're willing to pay for it. We can do it profitably and then kind of move from there. And I think also, if you get money too early on, it can almost be like a crutch. So you can be okay losing $100,000 a month or $50,000 a month or whatever it is. And right now for us, we can't do that. So we really have to focus on the areas that are super important. We have to make sure that the money we're putting in, there's some kind of return, or at least there will be in the future. Whereas if we just had $2 million in the bank tomorrow, we could easily just spend 10,000, 25,000, 50,000, even $100,000, and if we lost, it'd be like, it's not fun to lose that, but it's not really going to kill us. And I don't think that's really a good way to learn entrepreneurship.
No, I agree with that. I mean, staying lean, that kind of like, it changes the way you think, it changes the way, your decision making. And so I think that's a real benefit of bootstrapping. You really start considering what are the needs and what are the wants. And for me, like on top of that, I think like being able to create this brand or create this company, and I won't say in our image, but at least in accordance with our values, with our beliefs, is huge. And this gives us that type of control to be able to do that, to be able to like make sure that people can really see the vision before we start letting too many people in. And I feel like letting people in is like by giving equity, um, getting that real buy-in, getting that like, oh, I see what they're doing with this now. Like this is like, they can see where we're going with it. And I think like having that type of control, especially in the very early stages, is vital. So I think bootstrapping really helps us in that regard.
100%. And the other thing I would say is I want to be featured in publications or newspapers or whatever it is for having a lot of sales, not for raising a lot of money. So I think if you raise a lot of money, it's viewed as a really good thing in the startup world, but you're kind of celebrating giving away a lot of your company. And I'd rather celebrate that our product is great and a lot of people want to buy it.
Absolutely.
Then just the last thing I wanted to get your thoughts on related to this kind of topic is Dylan was talking a lot about how hard it can be to just basically create a company or create a product from scratch when you don't have any connections in the industry, any background in the industry. So I remember him talking about factories and how no factory would take him. He's basically like, take my money, and they wouldn't. And he ended up having to go all the way to Spain. So do you have any kind of like stories or anecdotes from our journey in terms of being really hard to get something done, but eventually we got over the hump?
Yeah, I think like the initial design was a hurdle itself, because we felt like, all right, in order for us to be taken serious by like a really like, legit designer, we needed to be able to have something tangible, something to give them or show them as to like, this is what we want. We want a multi-surface, multi-sport shoe. Like this is how we want it designed as well. These are some of the things we wanted. And so not to knock on, no knock on Fiverr, but like, all right, let's go there first because it's like cheap. We can get like a bunch, kind of like spray and pray, and maybe get something that we can like have. And so we can start showing people and we can seem a little bit more credible as we approach designers and product developers. And it ended up being a catastrophe, really. The spray and pray approach. I mean, I guess it worked a little bit because we eventually did land on a designer that brought something to the table, but really it's just like super difficult to get a design, even from people who like, they claim so much experience or they claim so much like expertise. It really became such a process, such an ordeal. And there were so many things, like if we were to go back into our drive and show some of the pictures of these concepts, they were, I mean, like, I feel like my girls could probably have done something better, but it was terrible. It was terrible. But thankfully we ended up with the designer with the experience, with the expertise, and then who shared the same type of like belief and value systems that we have. So that was probably one of the harder things, just trying to figure out like how to get a design, how to get this this product from our brains to some type of like paper or digital form. So
Yeah, I would have said the exact same thing. And I think that there's a lot of momentum that comes after you get the designer, at least for us. So getting the designer was super, super difficult process. But once we got the designer, we got our developer soon thereafter, and then brought on a design and branding agency. There's a lot of kind of like inbound interest that we get also from designers or people who want to work with us now, as well as they see that we're creating a product. So I think that was the huge hurdle. And then basically it's been easier since then. I don't know if there's been another huge hurdle since then, but I'm sure there will be another one at some point in the future. But just switching gears now, one of the other major topics that we talked about was standing out in a crowded space and differentiation. So I know Dylan was talking a little bit about his strategy for standing out, marketing a lot to kids and also to parents, almost getting parents kind of like scared about his brand and what their intentions are. So well, I guess what are your thoughts on that as it relates to our company? Do you think that that's something that we can do, try to be outrageous, or do you think that just based on the industry that we're in, it's not necessarily going to go over as well as gum?
Yeah. I mean, I remember when Dylan was saying this, I was thinking like, man, I don't know how Worldy can pull this off because, our product is a little bit different. Like with gum, like, you can it's the relationship is different than with with footwear, with a product that you have on. And so and it seems to be like more long lasting, like gum, you like spit it out or whatever. It's when you're done, but like a shoe, like kind of lasts for a little bit longer. And with that in mind, like you have to like present yourself in a much more like credible way. I say it's not like LiquidDeath. It's not like any of those other like consumable products. It's a product that you're like, you're wearing and that like reflects you. A lot of people think like, the stuff that they wear actually reflects who they are. And so when you're doing that, you kind of have to take it a different way. But then maybe just thinking about it from we had a conversation with our team just recently, and we were talking about colorways. And so and they were saying that you've got to be bold. Like you want to come out bold. And me and Aaron, we've talked about like monochromatic or that type of stuff. And that was really something that they were like, no, you got to come out with like something bolder. And that could be like our outrageous. Maybe it's not those Ren and Stimpy in your face cartoons that like Buddy's Gum wants to do, which is awesome, but like it would have to be something that's maybe a bit more muted, but at the same time it still like really resonates or speaks out or captivates the minds of youth. So I don't know, that's what I kind of like thought initially when Dylan was talking, and then later on when we talked to the team, I was like, oh yeah, okay, that's how we can be a bit outrageous with more of the the colorway or the design or something like that.
Yep. And then kind of just related to that. So another thing that Dylan was mentioning was that parody is can be a pretty useful tool. And people are just in general, they're tired of the same old marketing. So for Nike, for example, they're tired of that inspirational ad where someone is waking up early in the morning, they're running up and down the field before school, then they go to school, and then after school, they make the game winning shot or they catch that game winning touchdown or whatever. It's a bit tired. They know the script already. So potentially if you could parody that a little bit. So for us, one of the big things that we're thinking about is that basically kids are getting too competitive with sports too early, or at least some kids are being pushed kind of like into too much competition too early. So almost if we can parody that and point out how outrageous that is. So how outrageous it is for parents to care so much about the outcome of a soccer game between 5-year-olds, or a parent that gets really mad if their like 4-year-old screws up and misses a shot or something like that. So one of the things that I've thought about is, can you market in a way where people initially think that it's a Nike ad, it's an Adidas ad, it's a Reebok ad, but then they see more and more ridiculous things, and then they realize that it's an ad for something else, then potentially they pay a little bit more attention, and then maybe also that just communicates that their values are more aligned with our brand versus some of these other brands, at least when it comes to kids.
Yeah, I think that works out. That works out well. And it definitely gives the viewer, who would typically be the parent, an opportunity to kind of like, okay, they see this video or see this ad that they assume is your basic Nike, your basic Adidas ad, and then it kind of there's a twist, and I think that twist actually works really, really well because they'll see a lot of themselves in that original ad. They'll see a lot of like, okay, this is like par for the course. This is how they believe. This is what they've seen. This is how they've been their entire life. And then boom, they the rugs kind of pull from under them, and it's like, no, this is there's actually something different. This is actually about like the experience. This is actually about like building values and things like that. So no, I think that actually works real well.
And then the other thing that Dylan mentioned was that because we've heard in the past that moms are really the decision makers, and Dylan was saying it's not moms, it's really kids because they come home, they like bug their parents, or they're in the store, they're like pointing at certain thing that they want. So as a parent, what did you think about that? Do you think, I mean, I guess you're not the decision maker because no one says dads are, but what did you think about that?
I like to think that I am. I think there is like a nag factor. I think we were talking to another individual about the nag factor. And kids have a bit more sway depending on the environment. And so like yesterday, I was out at the grocery store with the girls after school, just picking up a couple of basics. And Kate's always like, "Oh, you have to go before you pick them up because they're just going to go and want everything." And I'm like, "Oh, no, it's cool. It's cool. Like, I don't want to go extra early just to go to the store and then like have to go pick them up." So then all right, I'm going to, go afterwards. And so we went to the store, and as soon as we go in there, of course, they're like picking up things like, "Oh, I want this, I want that." And so we go to the produce aisle, and there's a bunch of moms around shopping or whatever. And one of my daughters, she picks up like a little barrel of like these freaking organic super red apples. I don't know, they're like apples on steroids. And I'm like, she's like, "Oh, I want these apples." And I'm like, "Oh, no, these apples are like $20 for this." I'm like, "I'm not about to buy these apples." But then you feel like all these other parents are like eyeballing you now, like, "Oh, what kind of decision is he going to make here? Is he going to say no to apples?" I'm like, "Oh, all right, throw them in the bag, throw them in the basket." So we get like freaking $20 apples. But so I think there's like definitely, environments in which the nag factor really like works, and kids do have a lot of sway. But then you think about like maybe DTC, like maybe you're online shopping. And I know my girls are always asking for stuff then. And if I'm already going to get it, then yeah, it makes it easier for them to like pick and choose which specific one they want. But if I wasn't like planning on doing anything, more likely than not, it's easier to say no when it's like in your own environment. But yeah, if you're out there in the retail environment and your kids are just like going crazy, the nag factor definitely plays a role, and they will, especially things like Buddy's gum. If they're like wanting something like really like, relatively cheap, you just kind of like just to appease them for the moment, keep them quiet. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like for kind of like impulse purchases, so gum or apples, for example, where you pass by it and you're not necessarily looking to buy it, but it's cheap enough where you can add it to your cart.
Yeah.
That kind of like nag factor is larger. But then like you're saying for DTC, or potentially if your whole trip is for a specific product, like you make a trip to the shoe store to get shoes, maybe the parent would have a little bit more pushback on the kid and like, no, you can't just buy, we're here for basketball shoes. You can't buy a hiking boot right now. We just bought one a month ago. So I think it might be a little bit tougher for us in direct to consumer and retail, but I think at that point it goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier around just standing out, being bold, and really kind of speaking to the kid, and basically the design being something that a kid wants, and then once the parent looks more into the features and the benefits, being something that the parent is also okay with purchasing.
100%.
And then last point that I wanted to ask you about. So Dylan mentioned that premium should be accessible basically for everyone. So he doesn't want to have a product that is so expensive that people who don't maybe have as much money are not able to afford it. So what did you think about that and how that applies to us?
I mean, I think that's super applicable to us. We just had a conversation on this about like wanting to utilize certain types of materials, things that match with our values. And I've been kind of saying harping on values, but I think that's like a really like integral part of like our business model, and wanting it to do it in a way in which like we don't have to hike up the price to a point where the product becomes inaccessible for a lot of people, because price is a huge component when it comes to purchasing like things like shoes. So I think that's something that we've really like had to kind of go back and forth on, and it's really hard for us to like make a decision on it now because we don't have a true like picture of the cost And hopefully that's to come, like the cost breakdown when it comes to like producing these shoes. But I think we already kind of go into this realizing that we want this product to be premium made, but at an accessible price. And I think that's going to be one of our, we mentioned earlier in this conversation, one of the hurdles that we got over. I think that's going to be another major hurdle, because I think that's something that's extremely important to us. But we realize that there's a practical aspect of it as well. So having to figure out ways to like get that accomplished. And I think that's going to be something that we have to continue to have meetings with our design team, and then also the product development team, really just trying to make sure that this product is, like I said, premium made, but at a price that's accessible.
Yep, I agree with that. And I think it's also for us, it's somewhat of a positioning kind of issue. So, this is a shoe that's going to replace multiple shoes. So basically communicating to people that, yeah, it's one shoe. It might be more expensive than some other individual shoes that you buy. At the same time, it's not the most expensive shoe on the market. And the idea is that it's durable, it's going to last, and it replaces multiple shoes. So instead of comparing it maybe to just one shoe, compare it to all the different types of athletic shoes that you're buying today. And that's another way of making it seem a bit more accessible. So you pay more initially, but you get more value back. So I think we also just have to think about the positioning and communicating that clearly to potential customers.
For sure.
That's all I had in terms of questions, unless you wanted to ask some last questions for me or anything else you wanted to react to from the podcast.
I don't know if we want to talk about like how, I mean, Dylan mentioned it, and this is something that we've already said that we wanted to do as well, was like that hyper localized approach to like branding. And we wanted to have like, and this is something that we're constantly strategizing on, is like a grassroots approach to marketing and making sure that our brand gets traction in a certain region and then kind of grows from there. So I know that's something that we've discussed, but like, what are your thoughts now, kind of hearing what Dylan said about it and their approach to it?
I don't know if it really changed my opinion on it too much. The way that I understood what he was saying, it was almost like, because he's doing it in Texas, right? That's where he's.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, so I think it's partially because it's close to him, so he can kind of like keep an eye on the locations and kind of like deal with any issues that come up, things like that. And for us, I think it's similar. I would want, because we're both going to be kind of like on the western side of the US. I wouldn't necessarily want to launch on the East Coast into retail or anything like that, because I'd want to be able to, meet with the retailers, see how the product is being, displayed, how it's being explained to customers, things like that. So for me, part of the idea of having a localized approach is just being in that location so you can interact with customers, you can have some control over how the product is being sold or how customers are interacting with the product. And then also it's just, I think, from kind of like a financial perspective, if you just focus on one region, it's just a bit easier versus trying to do that kind of like spray and pray approach like you were mentioning earlier, and just kind of targeting the entire country. So that's the way I'm thinking about it. We've also talked about some of the values that we have and how that resonates a bit more with people on the West Coast. So I think that's kind of where my head is at. But curious if did the conversation when you have change your thoughts on it at all or no?
No. I think it just kind of like you mentioned earlier, just reiterated a lot of the things that I was thinking. So all those like aspects are something that I think are important when it comes to like to marketing and being able to like grow organically. I also thought that it would be something that would like reflect what our vision is when it comes to being able to eventually like produce locally. Like everything would be like super local or super in this hemisphere, and hopefully in the States, like to be able to kind of like do things in the consumer's own backyard in a sense, so that this isn't something that's shipping from overseas or whatever. Like obviously this is looking off into the future, and so I think the marketing and brand, and the brand should reflect that as well. Grow organically from a local area and be able to kind of like spread. So